Okay, so you're all logged in, ready to go? Almost. Stephen, are you on the community?
Yeah.
Alright.
Yeah, we're
Back to Peardeck. Daniel, you can just join it when you can. GYUYS is the code. Alright, we're good to go? So again, we're going to do this under exam conditions. These are questions representative of what you might see in an exam. Alright, so here's your question here. The table below shows the results of an investigation into the effect of temperature on the number of eggs laid by a female or laid by female red spider mites. 20 degrees, 90 average eggs, 30 degrees, 60 eggs on average. What is the percentage decrease in the average number of eggs laid per female when the temperature is increased from 20 to 30 degrees C? No, that table will only be up on the screen. You've just got multiple choice to choose from. So you've got to work that out. That is maths, yes. You should be able to figure this out in your head. Or you could figure this out in your head. I am not the best at maths, and I could figure this out in my head. If not, feel free to use a calculator.
How do you enter your answer?
You just press on the one you want. Yeah. Remember, exam conditions. You don't sit and giggle during exam conditions. You shouldn't.
The temperature decreased.
Yes, a decrease. Because it went from 90 down to 60. That's a decrease.
What do you do after you've chosen?
Just leave it. Alright, so that's worth 1 mark. Therefore, that is worth 1 minute of your time. Given that it's multiple choice, you would be aiming to get through the multiple choice faster than 1 minute per question. Because the more time you save in multi-choice, the more time you've got later on for questions that might require a little more time than you would think. So remember, in an exam, it's always worthwhile to try and keep an eye on the time and split your time effectively so that you get through all of the questions. If you're taking too long on a question or you can't figure it out, stop, move on to the next one, and if you've got time, come back to it later on. Alright, so I'm going to lock down the answers in 5, 3, 2, 1, locked. Alright, so let's have a look at the responses here. Alright, so 4 people went with a 30% decrease. Other 9 people went for 33%. No one went for 50, good. And 2 people went for a 67% decrease. Now, if you think about this, not so much in terms of percentages, but as in terms of fractions, it went from 90 down to 60. That's a decrease of a third. If you then convert that third into a percentage, it is not 30%, it is 33.33333333%. If you are unsure how to calculate a percentage decrease, you might remember that I shared with you some time ago a little thing called Maths in Biology. That lets you know how to draw graphs, how to work out ratios, percentages, fractions, etc. Basic statistical maths that is useful when you're doing any kind of science. But if you're not sure how to work it out, to work out a percentage decrease, you take your original number, subtract the new number, divide it by the original, and then multiply that by 100 to give you your percentage. So in this case, it'd be 90 minus 60 divided by 90 times 100 gives you 33.3333%. Let's just call it 33. Okay. When I first looked at it, my initial response was to go for 30% also, but that isn't the case. It decreased by 30, but that's not the percentage. All right. Moving on to the next question. Which labelled part has the lowest concentration of urea? And again, this is worth 1 mark, so that is worth 1 minute of your time. So this is just the renal system you can see here. You've got to choose which one has the lowest concentration
Are they both A's?
of urea.
Both A's. No, A,
That just this,
that's A.
just the structure it's pointing at is A, not both of them. So yeah, that's going to be the renal artery. Has the lowest concentration of urea.
Is that A pointing at the black one?
Yep, the darker one, the renal artery. Okay, locking it down in 10. So if you're not sure, take a guess. Natalie, Stephen, oh, just Natalie.
Sorry, just
That's it. Oh, okay. Do you need a charger? Someone got a spare charger they could?
I've got one in my locker.
Do you want to just collaborate with someone else for the moment? Alright, locking it down. Sorry, Natalie, you missed out on all the fun. Let's have a look at the responses. Alright, so almost evenly divided there between A and B. If we go back to the diagram, A is the renal artery. B, what's the name of B there?
renal vein.
It is the renal vein. Alright, it is somewhat difficult to see, especially from the back of the room. My initial thought was that it was pointing at this, the ureter, but that's what D's pointing at. So it's pointing at, that's the renal vein.
That's what B was given.
Is it A?
No, it's just to the left of the kidney. It is the renal vein. Okay, it would be easier if you were looking at it up close. Admittedly, it's not the best on this size on the screen. Okay, the answer is going to be A.
Yes! I got the right
All right,
answer.
so let's see. Stephen,
Yes.
you and Jack chose A. Can you explain why you chose A?
No, I originally went B and then Jack changed it last minute. I'm not sure.
William. Jack, why did you go for A then?
Because I don't know. I reckon the logical answer would point B.
Right, okay. So you went against logic.
Yeah.
Okay. Has anyone who chose A who wasn't just a lucky guess?
Yeah, it's because like the blood, like there's no like it's just regular blood, and then when it gets to like the other bits, they like purposely taking urea out of it, so that means there's more urea in them. So.
Okay, good. Yep. Lauren,
Oh, I picked B.
why did you pick B?
Plus also I can't really see this kind of stuff.
Right, okay.
But isn't it because like I suppose when it's pretty low and then when it's coming because it goes out down the bottom, so it just pick up all the stuff.
Okay. Okay. So let's see. Yeah, you chose B. Guy, you chose B as well for the same reasons that Lauren did. Let's see. Lachlan, you chose B.
Yeah.
Can you explain why you chose B?
No, I just stab it.
You just took a stab at it. All right. Okay. So if we go back to the diagram and have a look, A is the renal artery. Now, as Josh was pointing out, that's unfiltered, unpurified blood. That's the job of the kidneys, is to filter out all the toxins and excess substances from our blood. So coming down in the renal artery, which is A, blood is unfiltered. It's got everything in it. It then passes into the kidney. And as Josh said, at every stage, or the whole point of the kidney, is to remove urea, as well as things like water and salts. So the kidneys are going to take all of that urea out. The urea is going to be collected as urine, passed down D, which is the ureter, collect in C, which is the bladder, and then passed out, usually or hopefully, into the toilet. Meaning that B, the renal vein, is where all the filtered, purified, cleaned blood is. Therefore, it's not going to have any urea in it because all of that urea has been taken out at that point. So there should be no urea in B. Admittedly, a little bit difficult because the diagram is a little bit smaller there.
So B has no urea in it.
B should have zero urea in it.
Yeah,
So
but
it's
it
got
said
the
lowest
lowest
concentration.
Ah,
So B is
yeah,
right.
my bad. Sorry. My bad. Hold my hands up. I got that question the wrong way around.
Because it's
I was reading it. Yeah, sorry. B is the right answer. A is the wrong answer. Sorry. If it was the highest concentration of urea, A would be the answer. Sorry. My bad. And my apologies. This is what happens when I don't teach you a lot for a couple of weeks. It all falls apart. All right. Moving on from that embarrassing faux pas. Next up, these are otters. You don't get them over here, but you get them in Scotland. They're lovely little fellas. Look at them. They're so cute. Anyways, a study has shown that Scotland's river otter population is increasing after falling sharply over the last 40 years. Otters live along the banks of rivers, usually in reeds and gaps between tree roots. Fish are their main food. What term is used for the place where otters live? Now you've got to type your response to this one. What term is used to describe the place where otters live? Again, worth 1 mark, worth 1 minute. Go for it. The term used to describe the place where otters live. No, it's a biology knowledge question, I assure you. It's not like badgers live in a warren, rabbits live in a burrow, humans live in a house. It's not like that. This is the sort of thing you're likely to see. You're likely to be given an example and then have to relate that back to the knowledge you already have. Now, you don't have to be from Scotland to know the answer to this one, because we have done this.
Is that your answer?
5 seconds. If you're not sure, take a guess. Locking it down in 3, 2, 1. Done. Alright, I can see a few of you were having trouble with that. I can see quite rightly that some of you have got the right answer. If we have a look at the responses, so people have put things like, be careful with your spelling. That you're not going to lose a mark for habitat, Alana. Chloe, again, habitat? Okay, I'll let you off. I do the same thing. Alright. It is just habitat. The place where take otters out of the equation. It is just the place where an organism lives. It's habitat. Like I say, this wasn't specialist knowledge into the lives of otters. It could have been, but it wasn't. It definitely wasn't. So again, what term is used for the place where otters live? What term is used to describe where otters live? Or any organism lives? It's habitat. Jack?
It's not really hard because it's like what terms is the place where otters live?
Yeah, it's like this.
Yeah, it sounds specific.
Badly
It's
worded.
such a general answer. It's a specific question. It's confusing.
It is, but it's the kind of stuff you're likely to see, confusing as it may be. So that's why we're doing this, so that you can see, oh, that's a confusingly worded question, but the answer is really simple. Remember, I was telling you about something on Friday, something called Occam's razor. Do you remember what I was talking about when I said that?
Simplest answers are the correct ones.
The simplest answer is usually the correct one. Okay? So if you think it's too easy to be true, it probably isn't. Okay? Somebody had habitat, or a few people had habitat, sorry. Someone had environment. Who had environment? William, you went for environment.
I was gonna go with you. It does live in an environment.
It does, you're right, but that's not the specific name for it. Where it lives, it's habitat. People have put things like littoral zone. That's too specific. It is just nice and general habitat. Next question. What disadvantage might otters have if reeds are removed from riverbanks? So I'll remind you what the significance is with that. Otters live along the banks of rivers, usually in reeds and gaps between tree roots. Fish are their main food. That's all it tells you. Otters live along the banks of rivers, usually in reeds and gaps between tree roots. Fish are their
The main food, but it's not the only food.
main food. What disadvantage might otters have if reeds are removed from riverbanks? And again, this is worth 1 minute of your time. Shh. Fifteen seconds. William, I'll point out that's a double negative. Double negatives make a positive. If you ain't got nothing, you've got everything.
Damn. That's what I meant, yeah, I forgot that.
You got 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Welcome down. Alright, so let's have a look. Bear in mind, this is supposed to be exam conditions. I know looking at that top answer, who wrote that? Without even having to click on it to tell me that you put that down. Please take this seriously, yeah? You won't get a mark for that in an exam. So, they will have less place to live and will have to compete with other animals in trees for shelter. The otters have less food. They would lose protection from the shelter reeds. If reeds are removed from the riverbanks, they will be more exposed to the weather and predators. Loss of part of their habitat. They will have nowhere to live / protect themselves. Sorry, I'm way down here. They wouldn't have anywhere to hide from predators. Loss of some of their camouflage and more likely to be attacked. Alright, that's an interesting one. Let's have a look at that one. Loss of their camouflage and likely to be attacked. Does it tell you anywhere in the question that they use the reeds for camouflage? You cannot. You cannot assume. If it does not tell you that explicitly, please do not assume. You should never assume. Why should you never assume? Because it makes an ass out of you and me. Yeah, seriously? Alright, anyways. You only use the information they give you, never assume. Okay? It doesn't tell you that they use the reeds for camouflage. It only tells you they live there. Again, the simplest answer is usually going to be the right one. So, for example, someone put they will have nowhere to live / protect themselves from predators. Again, it doesn't tell you that they use the reeds to protect themselves. They only tell you that's where they live. It is one of the places where they live. So it is, somebody put, they will have this one here, they will have nowhere to live / protect themselves from predators. It doesn't tell you that they use the reeds to protect themselves from predators, nor does it say it's the only place they live. So this first half is the closest part of this statement that is correct, but not entirely correct, because they will have less places to live. That's all there is to it. They will have fewer places to live. Okay, so if I quickly just go back to the question to double check that we've put all that we need to for it. What disadvantage might otters have if reeds removed from the riverbanks? It's just saying though that is a disadvantage, having less places to live. Okay, Only use the information they give you. And again, William, double negatives make a positive.
Yeah,
Please use correct grammar in your exam. You are allowed to go into more detail, but not so much that you're making assumptions based on the information they don't give you. Okay? Use the lines they give you as an indicator to how much detail you might need to give. And remember, I gave you out that sheet that tells you how you should go about answering questions. So if it says describe or explain, that's when you go into detail. It's just asking what disadvantage they might face. If it then said, what disadvantage might otters have if reeds are removed from riverbanks, and explain the consequences, that's where you give more detail. But if you're just given a line to write an answer, and it's not asked you to explain or describe anything, then hold back. Okay? You're right though, Lucy. Where possible, give detail to make sure you're giving yourself enough. But if it's only worth 1 mark, it's only got 1 line to write on, and it's not asking you to explain or describe, you only need to give a base level of information. Okay? But if you've got the space and you've got the time, feel free to write more, but don't disadvantage yourself. This one, they will have less places to live and have to compete with other animals in trees for shelter. That's fine. This is extra information that's not needed to compete with other animals. That's extra, but it's still got, they'll have less places to live. That's still fine. Alright, moving on. Are we all good so far? Alright. Next question, still with the otter idea. Mink are North American animals, very similar to otters, introduced into Scotland. They feed on fish and live in riverbanks. What effect would the mink have on otter numbers? And explain your answer. So that's where you need to give that extra information. It's asking you to explain. It's worth 2 marks. So you want to give an effect and an explanation. 1 mark for each. It's worth 2 marks. So how much time is it worth?
2 minutes.
It's worth 2 minutes. Go for it. So mink are North American animals introduced into Scotland. They feed on fish and live in riverbanks. What effect would the mink have on otter numbers? Think, what do otters eat? Where do otters live? How does that relate to these other organisms? Okay, 1 minute up. Once you're confident of your answer, hit post. If you rethink your answer, hit new answer, that's fine. What's that going to do to the population? There we go. 5 seconds. Okay, I pressured Lauren into rethinking her answer, so I'll give you another 5 if you want it. Alright, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and locked. Alright, let's have a look. So again, worth 2 marks, 2 minutes of your time, and you're given an effect and the explanation. So let's have a look down here. What have we got? So they would cause a decrease in otter numbers. This is because, this is the top one here. This is because the otters will need to compete with the minks for food and will mean a decrease in the fish population, which is the otter source of food. That's perfectly fine. Something else. Is that you, Lucy? Yeah, well done. Something else that you could also mention. So the first mark is for saying what would happen or suggest what would happen to the numbers. Chances are they will decrease because there's competition. What are they competing for? They occupy the same niches, they live in the same place, they eat the same food. That they occupy the same niche or very similar niches. That means that overlapping niches creates competition. Look at the information they give you, think what are they competing for? Otters will need to compete with minks for food. So less fish for the otters to eat because the mink are also eating them. Decrease in otter numbers. Another thing you could mention is, the second one there, the introduced mink will result in competition between themselves and otters for food and habitat to survive. Otter numbers may decrease as the new species may take over the new habitat. Again, that's going to get you the mark. You've mentioned they're competing for food and habitat. You're saying that the population will decrease. So you've got your suggestion and your explanation. And it doesn't need to be a fully in-depth explanation of what's going to happen to the relative numbers. All you need to say is they're going to compete for food and for shelter or habitat. Since you occupy the same niche, good, Chloe, they'll be competing for food and may cause a drop in the otter population as well as take up the habitats. Great. As the mink are similar to otter in habitat and this is down here. As the mink are similar to the otter in habitat and diet, similar niches, this would cause a competition between the two species, meaning less food and places to live would be available. This would cause a decrease. Who's this one? Stephen / Jack. Well done. Yep. I'm just checking to see if there's any we need to. Someone's put. Daniel, you put this will have a negative effect on otter numbers. Be more specific or just say it will decrease. Okay? Competition. This competition. Share food. Right. Who's this? Callum. You said competition would exist between the mink and local otter population. This competition results because they share a food source and live in the same habitat. Where are you, Callum? There you are. That would only net you 1 mark because you've missed out what would happen to the otter population. You've not stated that. So be careful. You've got the right idea, but just be very careful in what the question's asking for you. And that goes for everyone. Be very specific. Look at the question, and what you could do is, if I bring the question back up, if I can find my cursor, if I bring the question back up, in your exam you'll be able to see how many marks it's worth. Look at it and think, what are the 2 marks going to be awarded for? You could even mark it on the question, on the paper. You could break it up, put little brackets around the different bits. So you put a bracket, what effect would the mink have on otter numbers? That's 1 mark. Explain your answer, bracket that off, that's another mark. So really split the question up into 2 separate parts. You've got 2 parts to your answer. Make sure you've addressed both those things in your answer. So just going back to this, just want to quickly check them, make sure see if there's any. Yep, all good on that. Just a few, like I say, similar sort of things. Just be careful you've covered the full question. Straightforward one. What term describes a green plant which makes its own food? Multi-choice, pretty straightforward question. 1 mark. Shouldn't even take a minute. This is basic. All right, 30 seconds. All right. Everyone's put an answer. I'm just going to lock it there and show the responses.
See? No, it wasn't.
What term describes a green plant which makes its own food?
Oh, man.
I'm glad no one put consumer, no one put carnivore. Consumers and carnivores are not always exclusive of each other. You can be a consumer and a carnivore. These are basic definitions that you need to be aware of. Photosynthesis.
Man. I didn't read the question, my bad.
Photosynthesis, the three of you that put it, I'm not going to name anyone, is the process by which green plants make their own food. But they are producers because they make their own food. Green plants are always producers. They do that through the process of photosynthesis. Be aware of questions like this that will catch you out. Be careful, those three of you. You know who you are. You won't be the only people who would do something like that. So this one, you've got to drag your little dot over the tertiary consumer.
Oh, this is hard.
I will give you a little heads up that there are two options.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Again, 1 mark. Technically, you won't ever get a question in an exam where you've got to draw a dot on the tertiary consumer. You'd have to name it, but there's no names on this one, and I wanted to change up the question type.
Are there two answers?
Yeah, I know.
1, 2, 3. Look at the tertiary.
Oh no, sorry, 1.
Yeah, it does.
My original plan was to make it secondary consumer, and I thought that's going to be too confusing. So yeah, there is only one tertiary consumer. My apologies. In which case, I've given you the answer. I really hope no one gets the wrong answer. Callum, you know better than that.
1, 2.
But it's still, it fits well
All right, any Lachlan?
Yes.
Have you made your response? All right, locking it, showing responses. All right, good. Yeah, I did kind of mess up. When I originally made this, I thought, oh, I'll make it secondary consumer because that'll be funny. There's two of them. And then I thought, no, that would confuse too many people and you've had a hard morning as it is. So yeah, tertiary consumer. Lachlan, like, is a massive ego. Like, you're not even on it.
Well, you looked into those dragons.
Oh, I see.
Kind of like that now.
Daniel, only just touching the tip of the wing there. Luckily, as I say in the exam, you will not ever be asked to drag a dot onto an organism. What you're likely to see is a food web like this, named organisms. You've got to say which organism is the tertiary consumer. Other things that when you see a food web, you could be asked to name the producer, you could be naming the primary consumer, the secondary consumer, the tertiary consumer. What is another term? In fact, here's a quick question here for you. So observe the diagram. What is the term used to describe the eagle? Another term used to describe the eagle. another term that you could use to describe the eagle. Close. Well done, Lauren. So another term you could use to describe the eagle at the top of that food web, the top of the food chain. Be more specific, Guy. That's too general. It is a term that you could use that term for most of those organisms, but not the one. The answer isn't one you could apply to all of them. All right, I'm going to lock this one down. You ready? Who am I still waiting for? Callum, take a guess. Nina, have a go. Can't remember. That's. Yep, I see you. Can't remember there. That is you, Cal. All right. Locking it down now. Carnivore, can't remember. Apex predator, predator, top order consumer. Apex predator. Yep, you could use that. It's at the top of that food chain, that food web, the top of the pyramid of energy or biomass or numbers. It's at the top. Another word for top is apex. Apex predator, because it feeds on other things, is a predator, is a carnivore. Apex predator, or indeed top order consumer, as we've got there, because it is a consumer and it is at the top of it, so you could use that also. Okay, just keeping you on your toes. Have we got any more questions? Have we got any more questions? Yes, this is the last one. I will read this out because I appreciate it's a little small. It's our favourite fishies and our favourite idea of osmosis and water regulation. Right, I'm going to read this out and I'm going to write the options for the brackets up on the board so that you can make your choices. Marine bony fish are found in the North Sea. Underline one option in each set of brackets to make the following sentences correct. You are actually just going to choose one word from the brackets to make the sentences correct. I only want you to write the 3 words. So it tells you, marine bony fish have tissues that are hyper or hypotonic. So there's your first option, hyper, hypotonic. So marine bony fish have tissues that are hyper or hypotonic to seawater. They overcome osmotic problems by absorbing or excreting salts and producing concentrated or dilute urine. Give me a sec. Concentrated or dilute. So I'll go through it again. You've got to choose one word from each of these 3 pairs. Marine bony fish have tissues that are hyper or hypotonic to seawater. So think of osmosis, think of where the high concentration is, where the low concentration is. They overcome osmotic problems by absorbing or excreting salts and producing concentrated or dilute urine. Pick the 3 words that you think best describe those little fishies. This is a difficult one. Especially, I will tell you now that hyper and hypotonic are two terms that I don't expect you to know for the exam. You have talked about it in class. I understand that this was a particular bone of contention with the class. So all I ask is that you've tried. Lauren? It's talking about their urine. So think of a human that needs to keep as much water in its body. What's its urine going to be like? I'm going to talk about it with the class. Alright, very quickly, just pop in your answers. I'll go through it quickly. And you've got 3, 2, 1, locked. Alright. Not sure. Alright, I will go back over it. Marine bony fish, they're in salt water, seawater. That means that the higher concentration of water is in their tissues, making them hypotonic to the seawater. That means the high water concentrations inside of them, they will lose water by osmosis. To get around that, they have to drink constantly. They're constantly drinking seawater. Seawater has a lot of salt. They excrete salts. That means they get rid of salts and produce concentrated urine because they're not drinking a lot. All right? We'll finish up there. It isn't, but I can do similar things with Google Forms. Yeah.
Why haven't Jackson?
Wait, what did we use to bring the tongs together?
We never